Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming today. It's a Saturday, which is not usually what we do here. So thank you for coming. Again, as I always mention, please silence your cell phones so we can avoid any interruptions. My name is Muhammad. I'm the executive director here at the Jerusalem Fund and Palestine Center. And on behalf of our staff and our board of directors, it's always a pleasure to welcome you here, including everybody that's watching online. It's also a great honor to introduce and welcome back virtually, I guess, our distinguished speaker today, Ambassador Dr. Husam Zomlot, who will be giving a talk titled "The Ultimate Deal: The Palestine Perspective." Despite his stated commitment to forging a so-called ultimate deal for peace between Palestinians and Israelis, President Trump and his administration have not taken any serious steps to do so. On the contrary, Trump has further alienated and marginalized Palestinians by recognizing Jerusalem as the undivided capital of Israel, moving the American embassy to Jerusalem, eliminating humanitarian aid to UNRWA and Palestinian hospitals, shutting down the PLO delegation's office in Washington, D.C., and by taking other hostile measures. At the same time, the U.S. continues to provide unparalleled support for Israel and its right-wing government led by Benjamin Netanyahu. Yet the PLO and the PA continue to remain publicly committed to negotiated peace, nonviolence, and the two-state solution. Now serving as the head of the PLO mission in the United Kingdom, Dr. Husam Zomlot will provide updates on the latest political and diplomatic developments and will discuss whether the Palestinian leadership still believes that a peace settlement is possible, and if so, how. So for those of you who don't know Dr. Husam, he is the head of the Palestinian mission currently to the United Kingdom. He was previously here in Washington until the U.S. government shut it down. He is also the strategic affairs advisor to the Palestinian president. Prior to his appointment to the UK, he served here. And Dr. Zomlot's previous official roles include serving as ambassador at large for the Palestinian presidency and director of Fatah Foreign Relations Commission. Dr. Zomlot holds a PhD in economics from the University of London. His academic career includes serving as a professor of public policy at Birzeit University, where he co-founded and chaired the Birzeit School of Government, and a number of teaching and research positions at Harvard University and the University of London. His professional experiences include working as an economist at the United Nations and as economic researcher with the London School of Economics, as well as the Palestine Policy Research Institute. So we were supposed to have Dr. Husam here in person, and so as you can see, he's not here, obviously. So he will touch on that. I wish we did have you here in person, Doctor, but hopefully we can see you in the future again later. Dr. Husam will speak for about 45 minutes, after which we will have a Q&A session. Please wait for the mic to come so that everybody online can hear, and so also Dr. Husam can hear you as well. For our online audience, you can tweet your questions to @Palestine Center. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Ambassador Husam Zomlot.
Thank you very much, my dear brother and friend Muhammad. Thanks also for the board of directors for the Palestine Center, the Jerusalem Fund. I am so pleased to speak to you today and to see so many friends coming. I apologize not being there in person, but I also almost have heard Qasim Muhammad, your son there, one of my best friends in Washington, D.C. I miss the time with Qasim, and hopefully with all other friends. And inshallah, we will be seeing all of you soon. And it is a particular honor to me to do so at the Palestine Center. For so long, such an important institute for Palestinian voices and a serious analysis of our cause has been the Palestine Center. In my last speech at the Palestine Center last year, and in anticipation of shutting the PLO mission in Washington, actually, I did find myself saying that we have many, many addresses to keep our voice, the voice of Palestinians and the voice of peace. And today is a proof that the Palestine Center remains to be a major address for voices of Palestine and peace. And I wish I could be there in person, but it is a measure of the state of official Palestinian US relations that I can't be with you in person today. It is a measure of how far these relations have regressed that we need to pause before traveling to the US to talk to you in person. I mean, this is happening after decades of relationship between the two sides, bilateral agreements, decades and historic relationship that now we are even considering that traveling to the US require legal and political thinking. They used to say that Washington, D.C. was the place where they would make the laws by day and break them at night. Today, at least when it comes to international law, they seem to be brazenly breaking them at all hours of the day and the night. Nowhere is this clearer than in this administration's handling of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, my friends. The dissident this administration shows for international law is obvious and deeply consequential. It will reverberate for beyond Palestine. But we are at the tip of the needle, we the Palestinians. And my friends, Israel's election has resulted, the very recent one, only a few days ago, has resulted in a continuation of a status quo that is against peace and for the continued and endless occupation. Make no mistake, the very two-state solution is at stake here. The very solution, be it a two-state or any other solution, is at stake here. The Israeli government has publicly rejected it, and the Israeli public has rewarded them for doing so. And the US administration has engaged in a systematic unwinding of the promise that was behind the solution. But while the obstacles may seem greater than ever, the actions of the Israeli government and the US administration have only stifled our resolve, strengthened our resolve. We are more determined than ever, even though this administration has engaged in a program to delegitimize and de-recognize the Palestinian people and their leadership. We understand that we cannot trust this administration. It's obvious. President Abbas took the strategic decision to pursue a no-contact policy with this administration. And as you all know, this came after we have engaged the administration at the high level, the highest level. President Abbas met President Trump 4 times between May 2017 and September 2017. Only in that very short span of time, President Abbas has met President Trump 4 times. We met the administration's team, the Trump's team, more than 30 times during that period. Our intention was to try and convince this administration to respect international law, to respect the long-held US policy, to respect the contours of the two-state solution, but to no avail. Unfortunately, it's obvious that the mind of this administration was made from day one before even we engaged them. But we did this after we heard that it would, we did the no-contact policy since the 6th of December, after we heard that it would close the PLO mission in Washington, a very severe act in every sense of the word, severe act to close a diplomatic mission, which is the address of historic relationship that goes beyond any political short-term consideration. We did this also when President Trump announced that he would move the US embassy in Israel to Jerusalem and recognize the cities as the capital of Israel, in a very serious contravention of international law and the US written commitment to us, the Palestinians, before the start of the peace process in Madrid and then in Oslo. And we did this before even we learned that the administration would defund UNRWA, the agency that serves the Palestinian refugees. We have done so because there's no appetite during that intensive period of engagement. There was no appetite in this administration to listen to us. It was very obvious. Our ideas were dismissed as old, as talking points. I myself was told by a very senior White House official that those are old ideas, talking points. But let me say this to you, my friends, and this is what we say to them. Almost 500,000 Palestinians in Jerusalem are not a talking point. I mean, these hundreds of thousands of Palestinians is the reality of Jerusalem. They own every home, every shop, every worship place. The reality of Jerusalem is that these people under military occupation. And the identity of Jerusalem, we were telling our counterparts, is that of inclusivity. Jerusalem has been for millennia an inclusive city, a model for coexistence, a model for diversity. In no time, never before, that anybody could lay exclusive claims to Jerusalem as Israel did with the acquiescence and the acceptance of the Trump administration. We told them 5 million people living under Israeli military rule in the occupied territory is not some public relations strategy or some imagination of ours. We told them the right of 6 million Palestinian refugees and 2 million Palestinians in Israel who are officially second-class citizens are not old ideas. They are real people in real situations with real rights. We want, and we were saying, and we continue to say, if you want an old idea, the only old idea is that all people are created equal and have certain inalienable rights. That is an old idea. You know what is also old, my friends? It is our connection, the Palestinian attachment and connection to the land, to our land. That is definitely old. That goes back millennia. And it will not end because the American administration thinks it can simply wave a magic wand and wish away these issues. It can't happen. Nor will our determination to seek justice, my friends, will decrease. We did not disengage from this administration to be obstructionist in any way or form. On the contrary, we unchained ourselves, we freed ourselves to be constructive and effective at peacemaking. Because for 26 years, this has been monopolized by the US and it has failed successively. And we have repeatedly suggested ways forward. Just last year, President Abbas traveled to New York to present our position at the Security Council, the United Nations Security Council. He proposed an international conference to implement international law and support the two-state solution, the principle of the two-state solution on the 1967 borders. He proposed a multilateral mechanism to help the parties implement their responsibilities and duties under international law and with international support. Multilateral, we have had enough of all these years of the US excluding the rest of the world. This is an international conflict and can only be resolved by an international mechanism. But we were ignored by a US administration that sent its envoy to the UN, Nikki Haley, specifically to protect Israeli expansionism in occupied territory and undermine any agencies in the UN that wouldn't toe the line. And my friends, you all have followed in the last year or so that the US has left UNESCO. It left the UN's Commission on Human Rights. Just last week, it revoked a visa to the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. This administration does not respect the principles of international law or the legitimacy of international bodies. It does not seem to understand that these principles and the bodies were erected out of the wreckage of the World War II for one simple reason: never again. This system was not established for the Palestinians. This system was established for humanity after the horrors of the Second World War. Never again the carnage of wars, of conquest that happened as a result. Never again the horrors of the Holocaust and the ethnic cleansing that happened during the Second World War. Never again a world plunged into chaos by racist and ultra-nationalist warmongers. But if the administration does not understand the language and the history of mankind, of our human family, of international law and international legitimacy, then, and they are very fond of their own language, then let me, my friends here, use the language of this administration to explain, maybe they will understand where we are and where we want to go. And I believe we are exactly in these ultimates, because they are fond of using the word ultimate. And by the way, here we know nothing about the so-called ultimate deal. Maybe Netanyahu knows, but we know nothing about this ultimate deal. But the ultimates that we know about is this. The first ultimate is the ultimate promise that was issued to us, made to us in the 70s and the 80s. And it was held out to us by the US-led international community. And that would the promise that the international community would spearhead efforts to secure peace between us and Israel based on the idea of two states on the 1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as the capital of a Palestinian state. It promised a just and agreed upon solution to the Palestinian refugee issue. That was the ultimate promise. As a result came the ultimate compromise, our ultimate compromise. And this promise led the PLO to abandon our previous goal of a single democratic state for all of its citizens in historic Palestine. And we did make that ultimate compromise, believing it was painful but essential. Painful because nowhere else a nation was asked to forgo 78% of its land, what it considers to be its land, for the sake of a promise in the future. But we did it. And as you may remember, in 1988, the PLO recognized the two-state solution by declaring an independent state of Palestine on the 1967 borders, in line with international resolutions and international legitimacy. Of course, this led to the peace processes, first in Madrid and then in Oslo, as you know, when for the first time the PLO recognized Israel inside 1967 borders. And Israel recognized the PLO as the legitimate representative of the Palestinians. And in doing so, during the Madrid and the Oslo, in recognizing the PLO as the representative, Israel recognized the Palestinian right, along with all other peoples in the world, to self-determination. The main idea behind collective representation is the right of self-determination. And then, unfortunately, alas, throughout the peace process came the third ultimate, after the ultimate promise by the US-led international community. After the ultimate compromise from us came the ultimate failure for 25 years of peacemaking. The process did fail. The Oslo process did fail. It failed for two main reasons, my friends. The first, it was left to bilateral negotiations between the two parties without regard for the vast imbalance of power between them. It rendered the US the sole mediator, entrusting to Washington the role of honest broker between two parentheses, to hold each side to their commitments. This, unfortunately, left the balance of negotiation and the negotiating power with the party with most influence in Washington. Do I want to second guess who's the party with the most influence in Washington? And it failed because for the US, Israel is not a foreign policy issue, my friends. Israel is a domestic issue. This administration and nowadays is the best example of how much Israel is a domestic issue in the US. And successive administrations, successively, have failed to hold Israel to account. Most egregiously, they failed to stop Israel's settlement project, which continued from day one, never let up over the 25 years since Oslo. And it is proceeding at unprecedented pace, as you may have been following over the last couple of years now. This project was targeted precisely at the two-state solution, and I mean by this project, the settlement project. It had a direct material consequence for talks. And Israel continued to build settlements and occupied territories, which is, as you all know, a war crime under international law. How could it be seriously negotiating the status of that same land? If Israel, my friends, continued under the US mediation, cutting off East Jerusalem from its West Bank hinterland, how could we believe that this would become the capital of our independent sovereign state? If Israel, during these 25 years, continued building colonial settlements in the Jordan Valley along the border with Jordan, how could we ever assume control of our own borders? This expansion was a direct result of the format of the peace process. Never was Israel sanctioned. The US approach to mediation was always one of offering incentives to Israel rather than holding it accountable. That was in stark difference, by the way, to how we, the Palestinian side, was treated during these 25, 26 years. We had to prove our state worthiness. We had to earn everything, including recognition. We had to earn our independence in a way. We, the victims, were expected to protect the occupation and the victimizers. It was absolutely unprecedented. I mean, not once in the history of mankind that the occupier demand protection from and by the victim. I'll repeat this. Demand protection from and by the victim. And yet we had to do it, and we still do it under the Oslo framework. But yet, this brings me to the fourth ultimate, which is the ultimate retraction. The ultimate retraction. Successive American administrations, Democrats and Republicans, yes, failed to hold Israel to account. That's obvious. That's clear in hindsight. But they all of these administrations, all of them, from the Reagan administration all the way to the Obama administration, all of them refer to international law as the yardstick for negotiations. But this administration, the Trump administration, has now done away with that yardstick altogether, has thrown that yardstick. It has shown only contempt for international law and for the United Nations. It has moved the US Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem and recognized Israel's claim to the city as its capital. It has recognized, as you followed, and some of you have even written about Israel's illegal annexation of the Golan Heights, a Syrian occupied territory. It has paved the way to do the same in the occupied West Bank, where Netanyahu just a few days ago, a day before the elections, has promised to annex more land in the occupied West Bank. It has failed to endorse the two-state solution, this administration. I bet you if you had anyone from the administration, including Secretary of State Mike Pompeo only a few days ago in the Congress on Tuesday, when he was asked, will they recognize Israel's annexation of occupied territories in the West Bank, he failed to answer. So this administration is not even endorsing the two-state solution. It has actively encouraged the settlement project. So my friends, this administration has not only sided with Israel. While all previous administrations did side with Israel, this administration has simply sided with Israel's settlement project and with a vision of greater Israel that precludes Palestinian national and individual rights. It is relentlessly delegitimizing the Palestinian people, treating the occupation as a merely domestic Israeli matter. If I want to qualify this point that they are treating the occupation as a merely domestic Israeli matter, why else has the Consulate General in Jerusalem been relegated to a Palestinian affairs unit with the US Embassy to Israel, within the US Embassy to Israel? I mean, why? Why the US administration has taken the decision to shutter the Consulate General in Jerusalem that was established in 1844, long before all this, almost 200 years ago, that has been a key point of contact between the US government and the Palestinian people and the Palestinian government and representatives. Why would it be relocated to the US Embassy in Israel and be called Palestinian Affairs Unit? The intention is absolutely clear that the whole issue of Palestine is only an internal affair in Israel. And if you follow the remarks and some of the statements by Jared Kushner only recently, a few weeks ago, he talks about right to opportunity. He talks about religious rights. He talks about civil rights. He even talks about dignity, but he doesn't talk about collective rights. He never mentions collective rights like self-determination or statehood or any of this sort, as if it's all about economic incentives and as if people's rights could be actually bought. Why, instead of hearing about possible routes to a two-state solution from this administration, are we only hearing about economic incentives? It's exactly that point that proves how they are looking at us and how they are seeing the conflict only from the prism of compensating for Israel's illegality by more promised economic incentives. So this administration thinks it can simply make the issues vanish. like if I may use this metaphor, exactly like an amateur magician. You know how they do the amateur magicians? They would go, with their cards and tricks, and they would tell you, "Hey, presto, gone are 500,000 Palestinians in Jerusalem. They are no longer there. Abracadabra, gone are 6 million refugees. They are no longer refugees. We don't define them as refugees. Hocus pocus, gone is an occupation of 5 million people. Now the State Department does not even use the term occupation. But this is a trick. This whole thing is a trick. It is an illusion, to be more precise. An illusion when they suggest that there is no Arab-Israeli conflict anymore. You hear the whispers that there is no Arab-Israeli conflict. It's an illusion. This is a game to them. It's just a game. They want to magic away the problems, my friends, really. They want to magic away the problems. They don't want to deal with them. That's the bottom line. They do not want to deal with them. What the Trump administration has done is systematically unwind the ultimate promise, the US-led international ultimate promise in the 70s and the 80s that have led to the ultimate compromise that led to the peace process, and then where we are today, the ultimate retraction. And without the promise, without that ultimate promise, let me say this, my friends, the compromise, the ultimate compromise cannot hold for forever. This is not eternal. This compromise was attached to a promise that should have been implemented almost 25 years ago. So friends, we, in light of all this, have two options before us, only two options. Option number one, we can dissolve the Palestinian Authority and throw the cards in the wind, simply in the wind, let them fall where they may, and invite Israel to take back responsibility for all the occupied territory. But option number two, we can double down on our commitments to a solution, to international legitimacy, but we must change course and strategy. Our choice is clear. It is clear. It has already been made and was explained by our President Abbas, to the UN only last year. We are not interested in winding the clock back. We want to move forward. And we want to preserve the achievements we have made, the institutions we have built, and the foundations we have laid for statehood. And with us, by the way, the international community. This was a real sustained investment by our international friends. But we are preparing for all eventualities. This is where we are. We are preparing for all eventualities and all possibilities. We are not going to sit still and only expecting and waiting for Godot. We know that this is a crucial and critical juncture in our history. It's obvious, it's clear to us and all of our friends worldwide. And that's why last year we reconvened the Palestinian National Council for the first time in 22 years. And the Palestinian National Council is the highest PLO organ that has representatives from inside Palestine and from the refugees and the diaspora outside. And this resulted, that convening of the PNC resulted in the reselection of the Central Council, which is the PLO's supreme decision-making body, specifically in order to prepare for possible national strategic decisions that only this body, the Central Council, is empowered to make. The Central Council was the body that created the Palestinian Authority, by the way. It was the body that elected President Arafat before national elections were convened. It is the Central Council that created the Palestinian Authority. It is the Central Council that can actually end it. So this year, the former technocratic government was replaced, as you know, this very month. In fact, they swore in just half an hour ago, was replaced by a new government led by a Fatah figure and composed of other Palestinian factions. Simply, this is not a time for technocrats. The decision was that this is a time for political leaders, political movements with local constituencies, with the ability to guide and mobilize our people back home. And this, by the way, is not about goals. This whole discussion we are having now, whether in Palestine or with our friends worldwide and with you, it isn't about goals, so we don't confuse the discussion. There have only ever been two just resolutions to the Palestinian-Israeli question. Only two. Number one, Palestinians and Israelis, all Israelis, Jews and non-Jews, enjoy full and equal political, national, and civil rights in two democratic states on the territory of historic Palestine, divided according to international resolutions and law, divided according to international resolutions and law, not according to Trump, not according to Kushner, not according to Greenblatt, or for that matter, Friedman, divided according to international resolutions that the US sponsored and voted for, 242, 338, and ending with the last resolution in 2016. So Palestinians and Israelis enjoy full and equal national, that's option number 2. Palestinians and Israelis enjoy full and equal national, political, and civil rights in one democratic state on the territory of historic Palestine. So again, this is not about these goals. We accept either. We do accept either. We had to abandon the one state, democratic state in 1988 in order to ally ourselves with international legitimacy, with international consensus, with international law and resolutions. But while we accept either of these solutions, Israel rejects both, as you know, and as it's been abundantly clear in the last election. This is a question of strategy then. If Israel rejects both and we accept both, then it is not about the goals. It is about the strategy to attain our goals and to arrive where we want to go. And we cannot go about it in the same manner as we have been doing so far. We simply can't. We must learn our lessons. So the next question here is, what is our strategy? What is the evolving strategy? Here I have the following to share with you, my friends. Number one, if we are really serious about resolving the conflict, we need to internationalize peacemaking. No longer we can accept a sole mediation by the US. There is no longer anyone of influence on the Israeli political spectrum, all of it, as evidenced by the recent elections, who is interested in ending the occupation. Not one real political party with influence that has come out interested in ending the occupation or adhering to international law and seeking a two-state solution based on the international legitimacy. The occupation is simply too comfortable for the Israeli political system and the Israeli public at large. There is also no one in the current US administration interested in international law or finding a just solution to our conflict. The administration is simply too hostile to international law and international diplomacy. It's obvious how hostile, how anti-multilateralism, anti-internationalism they are. We cannot simply trust this administration as a broker. Instead, we must seek a multilateral negotiations process whereby mediation is internationalized. I mean, peacemaking must be an international effort for the very reason ours is an international conflict, and it was made an exception for all these years. Name me one conflict in the last 50 years, 100 years that was resolved without international mediation. One, you will not find. Only us were made to or forced to accept a mediation that is solely in the hands of the US and a bilateral process that forced us to negotiate our freedom out of military occupation, which never happened. I mean, when the international community decides and votes that this is a military occupation, then by definition, that is a temporary state of legal affairs that should end soon with the help of the international community. We believe it is the responsibility and duty of the international community as a whole to act according to their own resolutions and do also hold Israel and all others equally accountable under international legal framework. We believe our appeal to the international community is stronger now, by the way, than ever, precisely because this framework, this international framework, is threatened. It is threatened by the unilateralism in the US and in Israel. And this collapse will have global consequences. It is not just about Palestine. It is about Ukraine, the South China Seas, Kashmir, Croatia, Slovenia, name it, the list goes on and it will grow bigger. We have resisted the Trump administration's attempt at isolating us. We did, and we will continue to do. We have done so, by the way, successfully. We have the continued consensus of the international community behind us, minus the Trump administration and some ultra right-wing strongmen, populists here and there. But still, the international equilibrium is there, the international law is there, and the international consensus is there. We are not isolated, and we are not alone. The Arab League, despite all the exaggerations here and there and the leaks here and there, just to dissuade us and to create more leverage against us, the Arab world, as happened in Saudi Arabia last year, and the announcement of King Salman, the King of Saudi Arabia, that summit was called to be named the Summit of Jerusalem. And in Tunisia, this very last month, has yet again confirmed its absolute support for the right of the people of Palestine, for ending the occupation, for a state and sovereign state with East Jerusalem as its capital, and confirming that the Arab Peace Initiative can only be implemented from A to Z. So this issue remains of the utmost importance to Arabs, Muslims across the world. And we are not alone, and we will not be alone, and despite of all the threats we receive and all the analysis we receive, because our issue is not just political in our region. It has to do with identity, with civilization, with history. It has to do with actually DNA. So, I think they have discovered the overestimation or the underestimation, actually, of the Arab world and the international community. Because, as you may remember, the US ambassador to the UN in the last 2 years, Nikki Haley, spent her time primarily to dismantle the international framework by using blackmail techniques to threaten countries should they dare vote to hold Israel accountable, or should they dare vote to uphold rights for the Palestinian people. And by the way, she failed miserably. Miserably. I was there in February last year when we presented a resolution in the UN against the Trump administration vis-a-vis Jerusalem, and we got an overwhelming majority despite her attempt at blackmailing and threatening the world. So that was number one. Number one is to work with our international friends, international partners, the international community to internationalize peacemaking. No longer we will accept the US to exclude major partners for us, major international players for us. We need them on the table. Number two, we will support a campaign of popular resistance and to continue the campaign of popular resistance. And by the way, my friends, what we mean by popular resistance is in all of its forms. And this is an opportunity to talk about it for 1 minute or so. It is popular resistance at the very heart of it is surviving on our land. And this is not an easy mission. It's not an easy undertaking to survive under such an adverse situation. It is our mothers, the mother who is determined to send her children to school in spite of the dangers. And there are so many dangers. The danger from armed soldiers at military checkpoints when these kids, these children, these students have to cross every morning and every afternoon. The danger from armed settlers answerable to a separate law, and they can shoot at will. Never they were brought to justice. And in spite of all these dangers, the Palestinian illiteracy rate is near zero. That is resistance. And it is resistance that we have actually one of the highest PhD per capita graduates worldwide because of the decision of our mothers every morning, every single morning, that we have come to a point where our society is proud to be able to sustain and to withstand this sheer pressure. So popular resistance is also building homes and businesses, building our schools and our universities and hospitals and factories. It is about trying to thrive even under the worst of conditions, and it is absolutely the worst of conditions. It is preserving the achievements that we have made, achievements that have made us ready, for statehood. And it is about mobilization in the streets. Yes, also popular resistance is about mobilizing in the streets, standing up, standing tall, and defending our rights, like happened only last year in Jerusalem. It is the Christians and Muslims praying together in the streets of Jerusalem, bringing the city to a standstill to reclaim their city and their holy sites. And I'm sure you have followed that scene of sheer human dignity, of using the prayer mattress as a method of resistance and winning, and actually forcing Netanyahu to remove the electric gates and to bring their city back as a city that is inclusive and a city that is open. And it is also people protesting Israel's wall in the West Bank on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, in villages all over around the wall and the settlements. Bil'in, Na'lin, Kafr Kaddoum, name them, to protest the theft of their land and to protect the means of their livelihoods and livings. It is our people in Gaza, the Palestinian people in Gaza, protesting against an Israeli siege that has left them in a cage for 12 years and brought them to the brink of a humanitarian catastrophe. You see these weekly demonstrations. Yes, we have been fragmented by this occupation. We have, for the last so many years, geographically fragmented by the work of the wall and the besiegement of Gaza and the settlements. But people are very creative, and when they are fragmented, fractured at the hands of the occupier, their popular resistance becomes localized. And this is a phenomenon that is happening. But that doesn't mean that there will not come a moment when there will be a mass movement everywhere. It's just a matter of when, not if. And thirdly, and lastly of our strategy, is that all this, with our ability to internationalize peacemaking and our ability to mobilize in a popular resistance mode to involve the entire society, we also still need to hold Israel accountable. We cannot have a table without 3 legs at least. And this third leg is absolutely crucial to hold Israel accountable, to deny Israel this culture of impunity that it has had for the last 70 years. It is about time that Israel is held accountable. And I say this not as a talking point, but I say this because this is a time when we have to convince our international partners that the occupation is too comfortable for Israel. Look at the last elections. It is not just comfortable, it is actually profitable. Profitable. The occupation is, as much as it is ideological and political, a money-making venture, a money-making exercise. I'll tell you some examples, my friends. Israel profits from the 60% of the West Bank land in the so-called Area C that is under its direct administration, military and civil administration. And it's a vast territory of land that is solely, primarily used by Israel. And therefore, may I, Mahmoud, I think something. Can you hear me, guys, there?
Yeah, we can hear you here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
One second. I'm not seeing you or hearing you. 1 second.
Can you hear us now? Yeah, they're probably having something on their end. Can you hear us?
Yes. 1 second.
Okay.
I'm sorry, my friends. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Can you hear us?
Apologies. I'm back. A small little technical issue. So the occupation is, I was saying, is as much as it is ideological and political, it is just profiting. The occupation is profiting from money making on a daily basis. It is from profiting from the water resources under that land that they are occupying, profits from phosphate mining in the Dead Sea that they are occupying, profits from gas explorations outside Gaza, the 2,000 Israeli companies operating in our land in Area C, so-called Area C of the occupied territories. Their taxes are paid to the Israeli state, not to the Palestinian Authority, by the way. And Israel charges us for imports, by the way. They charge us for importing to our market. It charges us to enter and leave. We are a captive market in every sense, almost the size of the Israeli population itself. Make no mistake, my friends, Israel profits from its occupation. In 2018, only last year, the UN, at our request, and also as stipulated by the UN Security Council Resolution 2334, the UN compiled a list of Israeli and international businesses that operate in occupied territory. The list is ready. The UN has prepared the list, but under Israeli and American pressure, this list has been kept from being published. We believe its publication is absolutely essential. Business must be named and shamed for colluding with an illegal military occupation. Settlements are a crime of war. Their products must be banned. The business and the businesses operating in them must be sanctioned, and we will not waver, and we are going ahead in the international system to make sure that they take up their responsibility. Any strategy aiming at ending the occupation must target the economic interests that sustains it, my friend. And here, I'd like to tell you that more than the majority, the absolute majority of the situation of the people who live illegally in the occupied territories are there for economic reasons. Follow the money, as journalists say, and divert that money and see what will happen to this occupation and this colonial settlement. So we are committed to a just solution based on international legality. We are committed to the international order. We are committed to respect for all people's national and individual rights. And we are not wavering, my friends. We believe there is no greater agency for change in the US on this issue than concerned Americans like yourselves. And I have worked with many of you when I was in Washington, along with progressive Palestinian and Jewish communities. And we are witnessing the change in the Palestinian community and the Jewish community and the voices that are coming out in the US. We believe this change is happening right now, right before our eyes. We see growing and more empowered Palestinian community willing and ready to speak out, speak truth to power. I'm talking to you at the Palestine Center, which was set up specifically to provide a platform for those voices in America and be a resource for scholars and policymakers and such a very important and timely discussion that is happening. The late Hisham Sharabi, may I remember, was a trailblazer in this respect. It is a trail that others are following as we speak. We see in it a new breed of congressmen and women now forging a path forward, not beholden to the baggage of the past. And people like Betty McCollum, who I had the honor of working with her, like Rashida Tlaib, like Ilhan Omar, and others, many others, are a sign of the time to come and a sign of our time. And now is that time. Now is that time. The Trump administration and the Israeli government have presented us with a clear choice, absolutely clear choice. On the one hand, there is the unilateralism, the phobism, the colonialism, and the law of the jungle. And on this side, the other side is a country that is Israel with not even one, not even two, but three different legal systems applied to different peoples. I mean, one for the Israeli Jews in Israel, and that is a semi-liberal democracy, and one for the Palestinian citizens of Israel, which is a striking institutionalized discrimination, and one for the Palestinians in the occupied territories under military occupation. There is a world in Afrikaans for this, for the three legal systems, for three peoples. That world is apartheid. That word is apartheid. Last year, Israel passed a nation-state law, as you all know, that defines the right to self-determination in the country as unique to the Jewish people. I mean, separate rights for separate peoples. There is an English word for that, racism. On the other side, there is the multilateralism, the internationalism, the principles that all people are equal before the law. and we will stick to that. And we are comfortable with being among the progressive and the people of the world who believe in that. Let Netanyahu enjoy his moment under the sun with these few strongmen, populist, far right, phobic. In this side, our side, of those who really believe that there must be such a thing as justice, that all are entitled to equal justice, and that rules-based international order is worth preserving, my friends. And it is the side of the founding principles of the United Nations. And we Palestinians, again, find ourselves in that side. We do want to see the world coming together, deliberate. It is at the side of the founding fathers of the United States that focused on that all men are equal and all people are equal. Now, more urgently than ever, do we need to hear the voices on this side in America, my friends. And that's why I do regret not being able to be with you in person, but I am also encouraged that this discussion is happening. I am honored and privileged that I had the chance in the last few days to address constituencies and audiences at the Kennedy School of Government in Harvard, at the Chicago University, at many other places, the J Street yesterday, and many progressive leaders of the Jewish community. That this discussion is decisively now. We need it more than ever. We must speak louder and more clearly at this point in time. We note that the House Foreign Affairs Committee just yesterday voiced concern over Netanyahu's promise to annex more illegal settlements and for the fate of the two-state solution. We urge Congress to do more and to be more than just concerned. We urge members of the Congress to act decisively and with urgency to reaffirm that the US stands behind a just solution in line with international law. We call on Congress to nullify all hostile laws against the Palestinian people, particularly the laws that were passed in the last few months, from the Taylor Force all the way to ACTA, that is done only to stifle the debate and to aid one side against the other, including also the outdated law that was passed in 1987 that designates the PLO as a terrorist organization. This is unbelievable. It must end. It must be nullified. And our conflict is not that complicated, as you all know. Indeed, nowhere else has there been such a broad consensus for long about what a solution looks like. Everybody agrees on the solution. What it needs is the political will to make it happen. What it needs is for international law to be implemented, not negotiated. Enough of negotiating principles. Enough of negotiating principles. We are only about discussing ways to implement these international principles. The UN Security Council resolutions were not a resolution up for a grab, but a resolution based on a very painful compromise that must be implemented. And if the US falls behind such a logic that we need to support internationalism, seriously falls behind it, I mean, that would create atmosphere that is unstoppable. An unstoppable momentum will be created behind it. We urge the US Congress to hold Israel accountable. We urge all of you to hold your congressmen and women accountable. For all of us, and thank you very much. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mohammed. Good to see you, Dr. Husam. We miss you. Washington misses you. I miss talking and engaging with you as we have. I want to ask you a question that I did pose to the State Department a couple of days ago, and that is, what will you do when Netanyahu comes through on his promise last Saturday to annex parts of the West Bank or all of the West Bank or the settlement blocks? What will be your first step after he does that? Because you can rest assured he's going to do it, and more than likely this administration will support him. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Saeed, and thank you for coming here. And I miss you too, my friend. Hopefully we'll meet soon. Well, I agree with you that most likely Netanyahu will carry on and carry his promise simply because it's his way to appeal to the very constituencies in Israel that will hold his government together and actually form a government together. Most likely, as you said, there is a precedent already in this administration recognizing the illegitimate and the illegal, like the Golan Heights, of actually endorsing such an illegal move. Israel has already annexed Golan Heights long ago. Israel has annexed East Jerusalem illegally in the 80s. Israel has done many illegal sort of de jure annexation. Our worry is not from Israel because, as I tried to explain, Israel has made up its mind. It's not just about Netanyahu. Israel is too comfortable and too profiting from the current situation. Our prime worry is, will this act be seen as legitimate or legal? Our prime worry is the international legality, the international system, the international resolutions. Are we able to isolate this as we did for Jerusalem and the Golan Heights? Are we able to make sure that the consensus remains to be that these are occupied territories? Are we able to isolate Netanyahu and Jerusalem in the coming few months and years? This is the question. Yes, but should he do that, that will be a very serious indication by the Israeli representative, the Israeli government, that they are not just not interested in the two-state solution by words, but by deeds. And I think that will pose on us a very serious question, my friend. And that's why I believe that should he do that, we Palestinians must reconsider what I described as the ultimate compromise. And I think there are very existential, fundamental questions that will be asked of us should he do that, and we must be ready to answer them. That's why I tried to explain why the PNC was convened and the Central Council was reselected, and why there has been decisions to be implemented by the PLO Executive Committee. All this is waiting for a moment when we find ourselves having to redefine the relationship with the occupier.
Did have a question from Twitter, and it says, "Do you still believe in a two-state solution with all the fragmentation of land these days?"
You know, this discussion is really missing the point, because people assume that the problem is in the two-state solution. And then if all this is happening, or with all that is happening, we must shift forward to a one-state solution. And number one, they're mistaken, because we actually would be going backward, because we had to abandon the one-state solution model in 1988. The PLO, and Saeed remembers these days very well, the PLO platform before 1988 was a one democratic state for all of its citizens. Insisting that the problem is in the goals, in our opinion, might miss the point. That's why I did make it clear in my remarks earlier that we accept either. We accept one state that is truly democratic for all of its citizens, egalitarian, and we accept two states based on the international legitimacy. You know, the borders of these two states are divided based on international legality. The problem is Israel rejects both. And then we must be way more concerned with garnering resources and means and tools to attain one of these two goals, regardless. So consuming our energy with one state or two state, in our opinion, misses the point. It misses the point. And at this point in time, we must calculate and we must measure what would be our strength, you know, points of strength, and what would be our points of weaknesses. In our opinion, a major point of strength for us is this toothless international system. And I repeat it, it's toothless. It has no tooth, it has no ability to enforce its own decision, but it remains to be, unless you give us another source of international order, it remains to be a very clear sort of reference that we need to keep. Should we forego that, we need to think seriously, because, you know, calling for civil rights at this point in time, after what we have gone through, a first intifada and a second intifada, the Oslo peace process, calling for civil rights is something that I, as a Palestinian, want to think about very seriously. Do I accept it? I belong to a national movement, and the national movement is primarily about liberation. The PLO, the L in the O in the PLO is about liberation. It's about statehood, sovereignty, independence. And, you know, if you go back to the Balfour Declaration, it wanted to give us, the Palestinians, they call us minorities, civil and religious rights. I mean, there are issues that we need to think about, Abu Qasim. And there are so many other issues we need to seriously think about instead of engaging us in such a debate now. What if we declare a one state now? What will happen to the settlements? Will they become legitimate all of a sudden? What will happen to the international consensus that we have been defending and trying to isolate Netanyahu and Trump? These are crucial questions, but also those who propose these ideas have legitimate concerns and have legitimate ideas. I mean, what are you talking about when settlements and the number of settlers have been 700,000 now? And Netanyahu and all contenders against Netanyahu, including Gantz, said they will not remove one settler, not from the blocks, not from even remote settlements. So these ideas, the discussion about the plausibility, the possibility, the doability of the two-state solution is very legitimate and very real. Very real. That's why I think we should not be concerned about one state or two state. We should be concerned about altering the status quo, the dynamics of the status quo. Number one, Israel was aided by a US sole mediation for 26 years. We need to deprive Israel of that. Number two, we need to strengthen our popular resistance to raise the cost of this occupation. And number three, as I said, internationally, we must target the business of occupation, the profitability of occupation. Once we do that, and we do it more effectively, and we get to a point where the occupation becomes so costly, then we sit and talk about what is the best solution. I assure you Palestinians are going to be fine with both.
Thank you, Dr. Zomlot, for your words and sharing these insights with us today. My question is actually about the state of democracy amongst Palestinians today. It's been almost 15 years since the last election that put Mahmoud Abbas into power. And there is a growing sentiment amongst Palestinians in Palestine and abroad that the leadership today does not represent them and is not accountable to them. I was very glad that you brought up the PNC elections, which I think were a very good first step in that direction. But I wonder if anyone in this room participated in those elections or casted a vote or was a part of this. So my question for you is, what is the state of democracy today for Palestinians, and what can we do as Palestinians to strengthen this?
Well, the state of democracy in Palestine is not at its best, and this is a self-inflicting or inflicted wound on us for the last 12 years. And the prime reason for this self-inflicted wound is the Palestinian division, the Hamas takeover of Gaza, and the inability to renew our democratic process since 2007. And I'll tell you, your question is the most relevant question, because I believe personally, and I think all Palestinians do, that the one thing that has allowed us to sustain for all these years, the one thing that has enabled us to put up with all that has been coming our way is democracy, is our ability to create a common political arena, that is the PLO, is our ability to convene elections and to be democratic even under occupation, and even when we were in exile before the PLO returned to the occupied territories, and our ability to even have Yasser Arafat offer his name for elections in 1996, the father of the nation. And the people of Palestine will not accept any person not to be elected by the people and for the people. And I assure you, without that democratic renewal process all through the years, our situation would have been much worse. So, where are we right now? We are in a situation of what you call in America catch-22. Elections must be convened, and the people of Palestine have the absolute right to select their representatives. And I assure you, no one is more keen on them than President Abbas, because he was warned against convening elections in 2006 by all parties, and there was a lot of pressure that he doesn't convene it. He convened it. I mean, the parliamentarian elections. Hamas won. He handed in Hamas, formed the government, and then a few months later, the coup d'etat happened, the division happened. And guess what? During these months of Hamas government, 2005 to 2007, it was the world that boycotted. The world that boycotted the Hamas government and our government, because the world wanted democracy, but they wanted democracy that is tailored to their own preferences and their own expectations. But nonetheless, since then, we have been wanting to convene elections, my friend. We do, because we know without it, It's a problem. There is a deficiency somewhere. But think with me, if we convene elections now, after Netanyahu clearly said that he will not allow for us convening elections in Jerusalem, as we did in the previous elections, and Hamas will not allow for convening elections without reaching a reconciliation agreement. So we convene elections in Ramallah, in the West Bank only. This has been the dilemma for the last 6-7 years, because at least in the 12 years we had a 4-year period of elected officials. This dilemma needs to be resolved, and I think the new government, its first mandate that was sworn in just an hour ago, this new government, its first mandate of its letter of appointment is to find a way to convene national elections in the West Bank, Jerusalem, and Gaza. And hopefully, my friend, that will happen. I don't have a crystal ball to tell you when it will happen, but it should happen. And short of that happening, I agree with you, we are all in trouble.
Hello, Dr. Zomlot. My name is Michaela. How are you?
Hello, Michaela. Good to see you.
It's so good to see you.
One of our team, Michaela.
It's really good to see you. I was, as you know, I was the last intern in the office before the office shut down, so I'm really happy to see you. We miss you and your family a lot here in DC, just to echo Saeed's words. But I also have a question for you about your efforts and how it's going in the office over there. With everything that's going on with Theresa May's government and Brexit, I'm curious how your office is reaching out to the government and who you're reaching out to. So I hope that's going well for you.
Hello, Michaela. I miss you too, and I miss the team. Nothing I miss more than the team that we were able to build in Washington. And you remember, Michaela, that was a team on fire. And I think part of the closure of the mission was the one thing to blame is the team. They were really effective and were seen and heard, especially in the public sphere. And I remember your videos going viral. Anyway, we're doing the same thing here in the UK now, Michaela. And as much as I'm proud of you and what you have done, I'm so proud of my team. Behind me here are 3 of them. They are looking at us as we speak. They are all working in the sphere of the public relations, of the public engagement, in the social media, and what have you, of the political files. And I only speak, but they prepare everything. And we were able to put a new team here. All of them are new. They were recruited only in the last few weeks, and we are hoping to even recruit more. The UK is a very important place, a very important country, going through a very particular situation, as you just mentioned, the Brexit. That is posing not only a political crisis in the UK, but actually a constitutional crisis in the UK. But like the Chinese say, with every crisis comes an opportunity. And in there, we look at the opportunities. In the UK, there is a broad-based support for Palestine, the public opinion. But the gap continues to be bigger and bigger and wider, more wide, I mean, between the public support and the government decision-making process. And here is our role to translate that public support into government official decision-making process. And for that reason, we need to build our capacity here to see all the challenges and to see all the opportunities. And I assure you, the UK has a historic responsibility. And the UK is a very, very important partner. I think our president's decision to reappoint me to London also was political and strategic, that we look at Europe and we look at Britain, given its history, its bad history with us, I must say, the Balfour Declaration and its own mandate and what happened during the 40s, but also given its present now as a country that has very good relationship with us, with the Arab world, with America, with Europe, of course. And no matter what, the UK would remain to be a European country and a major player in Europe, and its good relationship with Israel. All this is a bonus. And we believe that the UK could actually play a role in leading international effort, not replacing the US. We don't want the US to be substituted with a new country, that is the UK or any other country. We want the UK and all other countries to actually spearhead, lead international efforts for peacemaking. I have arrived only a few months ago, as you know, from Washington. And things are very complicated here because of the Brexit. I thought Israel-Palestine was complicated. Actually, here it's also complicated. At least in Israel-Palestine, we have a tunnel, but we don't have a light at the end of the tunnel. Here, they are searching for the tunnel still. But Soon, hopefully soon, we will be able to engage this country and beyond it, Europe, in a way that would balance the situation and also correspond to the exciting discussion that is happening in America. Finally, I am touched by the level of people-to-people relationship in the UK and Palestine. I'm truly touched. I was in Scotland only a couple of weeks ago, and I saw the depth of the relationship between the community in Scotland and the community in Palestine at all levels. I mean, twinship of municipalities, Dundee and Nablus, Glasgow and Bethlehem, the relationship between firefighter brigades here and there in Palestine and Scotland, football clubs. I went to Celtic and I saw the thousands of Palestinian flags flying. So that is a source of inspiration and hope for us here to be able to influence the government position via its representatives.
Hello, Dr. Dan Lieberman. Yeah, one thing about Israel is it has no defined borders, it has no constitution, and there is no Israeli nationality. In other words, Israel has a government, but it really isn't a defined nation state. And here we're trying to form two nations when Israel really isn't a defined nation, and they seem to prefer it that way, and they prefer it that way because it allows them to expand at will, you know, as they want. It seems to be their preference. So what is there today that will change Israel's concept of itself from yesterday? What is there more to make Israel into a state with defined borders and not an expansionist state that it prefers to be?
Well, thank you for your question, really. Thank you. This is the real question. And, you know, people accredit Nelson Mandela with what happened in South Africa. I love Nelson Mandela. He's a hero of mine, but I don't think he should be the one only accredited. I think de Klerk should be accredited. And then de Klerk was the one who actually came to the conclusion that apartheid cannot continue. Now, the question is, why did de Klerk come to that conclusion? It's exactly because what I tried to explain in my 3 strategic points. De Klerk came to the conclusion that he must engage Nelson Mandela and the Black South Africans because de Klerk came to the absolute clear conclusion that South Africa will not sustain because of the international isolation, because of the economic sanctions, because they could not play football anywhere, they could not play rugby anywhere. They were shunned wherever they went. I mean, the apartheid regime and the proletariat regime. So, answering your question, Israel has been doing this: no borders, open-ended borders, conquering more land, annexing, as Saeed asked, and I'm going to come back to his question because I think I didn't give him a very clear answer. But, you know, why they have been doing it? The answer is so simple, because they can. They can. They just can. There are no consequences. There are no consequences. And it was left to us, the Palestinians, to create the consequences via our national intifadas and revolutions and all what have you. It didn't work on its own, and it would not have worked anywhere else unless there is such an international adherence to their own values, their own principles, their own resolutions and laws. So, mark my words, my friend, short of Israel feeling the cost of this illegality, be it the discrimination against our brothers and sisters inside Israel, the Palestinian citizens of Israel, be it this military rule that have lasted for 52 years, that see children being imprisoned. And I salute Betty McCollum, that's why I mentioned her name first, for presenting a law when I was in Washington to hold Israel accountable in the Congress for imprisoning and torturing Palestinian children. We have more than 300. This is unprecedented, by the way. And for violating every basic provision of international law. And when you can do it, when you have the cake, you can eat it too. Why would you alter? So the main thing that will change this dynamic is when we start together. If Palestinians, you know, engage in a third intifada tomorrow on their own, as we did in the first intifada, without international isolation of the system, as happened in South Africa, via the governments and the people of the world, it will not be efficient or sufficient enough. We can do one major pillar, which is our own resistance and popular resistance on the ground, but that requires the international side, and it requires the international side not only in the sanctioning, which is important, which is the stick, the real stick, but also in the current, in the mediation, in upholding that any peace would have to be based on international resolutions and on the concept of justice. Guess who did say that? That was President Obama in his first speech in Cairo when he went. The main thing he said in that speech, I will make peace in the Middle East, I will intervene between Israelis and Palestinians, but I understand that peace can never be made without justice. So Israel is no exception. The Israelis are not doing it because they are bad people or because they are exceptional people or they have some psychological issues. No, they are just normal human beings. Any normal human being, when he or she can have the cake and eat it too, when they know that their actions have no consequences, when their per capita income is $45,000 a year in comparison to the per capita income in Palestine. Can you give me a figure? What's the per capita income in Palestinian cities that are only 20 minutes away from major Israeli cities? Actually, sometimes it's adjunct to Palestinian villages like the settlements. It's 2,000 barely between the West Bank and Gaza. 2,000 in Egypt, a neighboring country. So you make 45,000, and you are able to go and have a dunam, 2-3 dunams of land, having a villa and a swimming pool in the occupied territories for a fraction of the price if you are going to do that in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. Of course, you would go to a stolen land if it gives you advantages, and you will not give up your advantages voluntarily. No human being, no person gives up their privileges voluntarily just because they are nice or we are nice. Unless that person who lives in that villa with that swimming pool realizes that he or she will lose the entire villa and the swimming pool if they don't share it, they will not share it with a poor man sitting in a shank next door. So this is the mentality of humankind. This is the history of humankind. We need to think together seriously about creating the consequences for these illegalities. And by the way, we are halfway through. We are even more than halfway through. I'll tell you, the resolution 2334 that was passed the last month of the Obama administration in December 2016 is historic. Historic. Because for the first time, that UN Security Council resolution builds in it, inbuilt, the consequences I'm talking about, the accountability I'm discussing now. It called for the establishment of a blacklist of all companies that deal with the illegal Israeli settlements in the occupied territories. And that's exactly why Israel is panicking most by economic actions, not political, not even legal, not rhetoric, economic. That's why it has put its absolute full wrath and pressure on Airbnb. Only 3 days ago, Airbnb, under such pressure, had to reverse its policy of not listing the illegal homes and properties in the settlements. Now they are listing it again because Israel knows that this is the beginning of the end. Economic interest is why the 700,000 are there. So we need to focus our efforts. And Saeed, may I come back to you here about the annexation, because I felt I did not give you a compelling argument there. You know, we have no way of affecting neither Netanyahu nor Trump. And it's very obvious, this holy or unholy alliance. But we have no way to influence them, I have to say. The most important battle is to make any step they do or they make illegal, isolated, and unilateral. The whole battle is that, you know, they started by saying the Jerusalem move, for instance, will be followed by so many countries that it will break the equilibrium. The Arab world is gone, khalas, finito. And the Palestinians will see no more votes in the General Assembly. That's the real battle, Saeed. And I'm saying it here because it's crucial. We should not be disheartened or lose hope, and call it for what it is. These acts by Netanyahu and Trump are unilateral, illegal, and isolated. They might have some leaders like Bolsonaro or Orban of Hungary who are flirting with them because they share the same twisted ideology. You know why the Prime Minister of Hungary is in partnership with Netanyahu, because they have the same anti-immigrants, anti-others ideology. But this is not internationalism. This is not the international equilibrium and the international will. And I know what is going in your head and in the head of many Palestinians. What have we done with internationalism for all these years? What have we benefited from internationalism? No, we didn't. We didn't benefit anything concrete. We didn't. But without that internationalism, things would have been way, way worse. At least there is a system that guarantees the yardstick and the framework that we could defend. And if we lose that, I think we will be in a much more disadvantageous position. And you want to know why Israel is so panicky about the UN and why they are pressuring the US to dismantle the UN and to withdraw from UNESCO and to attack the UN Human Rights Council? Because it matters. It matters. We just need to activate it more and to turn this situation with Trump into an opportunity to look at the upside of this Trump. Remember, Said, I wrote an article for the New York Times as I was leaving Washington, and I say, you know, we see the upside of the situation. Number one, to break away from this failed peace process led by the US. Number two, to correct the bilateral relationship. We should not return to Washington officially until we do it on a reciprocal, equitable, respectable manner between two nations and two countries. Hell with these laws for the last 30 years after signing a peace accord, the Oslo, in the White House. They have to be not nullified. They have to end. And this is an opportunity that we argue our case, that our relationship should be based on mutual values and mutual interest, not on threats and blackmail, not on using these laws right, left, and center by the Congress to ostracize the Palestinian and pressure the Palestinian. We should not accept this game anymore. And there is so much that we can take from the US, but there is so much, Said, that we can give back to the US. And number three, in that article, and I still believe in it, this is a time when Trump allows us to alter, to shift our strategy from the top down, focusing on the White House, the president, and few of his advisors, to the bottom up, engaging the American people. I was encouraged, really encouraged. I wish you saw what I saw yesterday, only yesterday, at Chicago University, the annual lecture of the Chicago University, the conversation that happened with the students, the questions I received, the comments that I was having. Also the discussion with the Jewish community, the leaders of the Jewish community, only yesterday as well. So we need to focus more on the masses, on the people, on the grassroots, to the public, and to forego this focus on an administration that will not really deliver the goods unless and until we do the real investment, which is the strategic long-term investment with the American people.
Ambassador Hussam, thank you so much for presenting. We wish we could have had you here, but hopefully we can see you soon. But thank you very much for your presentation and for updating us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Muhammad. Thank you, everybody.